Hi there, I'm Joshua Farnsworth and welcome to my traditional woodworking school here in Earlysville, Virginia. In this two-part video series with Will Myers, you're going to learn how to assemble a frame and panel door, and this is part of a video class that we have on building a historical shaker clock that hangs on the wall. So I hope you enjoy this and stay tuned for part 2.
I've finished the other 3 tenons here, and now we're just kind of doing a final dry fit. We're going to check this thing for square and make sure it's flat as well, kind of like on the upper door. And I think we're pretty good on this one. I haven't had to do much tuning on it, which that generally means you're going to be pretty good. Like the more I have to work on shoulders, and the more things tend to want to get out of square, so, and more to fix. So I've got this just kind of dry fit here, and I'm going to square to, man, that's right on it. So I'm going to come down here and check, make sure we're pretty good. And we're really good. So just like the upper door, I want to check for flatness, and we're just maybe a tiny little bit of twist, but I don't know if you can see it, but I think we're good enough to go. But you can just eyeball from the, the horizontal edge here to the horizontal edge on the other end, and you can see it without ever putting it on a flat surface. Or it's a kind of a hard thing to check, with a straight edge or square. So just eyeball it, just look at it, you can see it. Okay, so there's my lower door. This one has a panel in it. Okay, and this, I think you can see right there, is a very thin piece of white pine. This, you could use like the rest of the clock's butternut, you could use butternut panel or whatever. And you can also use a thicker panel. This is 1/8. It's 1/8 is a hard, once you start getting down this thin stuff, it's hard to deal with. And I've prepped this ahead of time. And usually how I deal with it, most surface planers, electric, machine surface planer, they'll go to 1/8, with no trouble. But the problem is if the grain is not pretty well straight down the length, a lot of times they'll come apart. It'll shatter in the planer. So it can be a little bit difficult trying to make 1/8" white pine. Another way, the way I produce these, or way I come up with this, is actually one of these clocks in the background. This is the book match piece to that panel. So I've got like 3 panels out of one 5/4 piece of white pine. But the way I do it is I start out, you need to resaw it on a bandsaw, hand rip saw in white pine. It doesn't take long, but cut it longer than you need. That's the main thing, not so much wider, but longer. And that gives you the ability to, when you get down to the finishing and the planing, you can clamp that longer section to the bench, do your planing, and you'll have to turn it around some, but it's hard to, if you want to clamp it like in an end vise or plane against a stop, it's just so thin and so floppy, it's really hard to deal with. So mill your piece long and then cut it to length later. And I've already roughed this one into length. So now we need to fit it to this door here. So it's fairly close, it's a little bit long. And I've got one end of this thing, I checked it earlier, that's more square than the other. And that's the end I'm going to keep, this end. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to use the door frame to make this panel. And my knife marks that I use to lay out the molding, they're 3/16 from the edge, and that's how deep the groove is. So all we have to do is use those knife marks and transfer to the panel. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to try to get this where you can see it. Line that edge up with that knife mark there. And I'm going to come down here. Make sure I haven't moved. And I'm going to make a little pencil mark here. Now just to double check, make sure nothing's wonky, I'm going to move it to the other side and make sure it looks like it'll still fit. And this looks good, so we can go with that mark. So now I'm going to use my square, and for right now, I'm just going to pencil this. And I am going to use just my marking knife here, and let me get to a place where that'll work right there, I think. This is so thin, if I take a crosscut saw, I can cut it, but you risk damaging it because this is a soft wood and it's very thin. And so what I'm going to do is just take my marking knife and I'm going to line up with my pencil mark there. And I'm just going to make a few passes right here. We're going to cut this with a knife. Just get as deep as you can. Okay. Keep my bench clean. I don't want to, these things are, I've already kind of got one side of this nice and smooth and cleaned up, and I try not to dent it. Okay. So what I've done, I just took my marking knife there and highlight that a little bit, maybe you can see it. Transferred that around to the other side. So now I'm going to come back with my knife again. From this side. And just make several passes, get as deep as you can. You really can't cut all the way through it. So now I can just take and snap that off. So we just cut it with a knife. And it's safer, I think, for the wood as far as possibly damaging it than trying to saw it. I mean, saw's hard to handle on something so thin. So now we've got our length, and we look pretty good right there. So now we've got to deal with the width. Here again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use my knife marks. Okay, on the width, as seasons change, humidity goes up and down. White pine doesn't move as much as most woods, but it will move a little. So we need to leave right now we're, coming off summer, everything's probably swelled up as big as it's going to be right now, but just in case somebody sprays it with a water hose or something like that. We need a little room for that panel to expand and contract in that groove. That's the whole reason for a frame and panel door. So let me get around here, maybe you can see. So I'm going to come in maybe a 1/16 from this outer knife mark. Be sure my frame's still pushed together here. I need to scoot this end. So we want it just a little bit more narrow than, and it's better to err on a little bit big. We can take a block plane and carefully trim this, make a pass or two if it's a little bit tight. But if it's a little bit loose, that's too loose. If it could slide far enough to come out of the groove, that's really bad. So is that? Let me use my framing square here. Okay, this time we're going along the grain and we're going to cut it again with a knife just like I did the other side, but we're just going to really kind of be careful because if you really dig in a lot right here, you could possibly split the edge off, and we don't want to do that. We want to cut it off. So I've just lined up to my two little pencil marks I made there. And I'm just going to make several light little cuts here. Like I said, I don't want to get too aggressive, and I might can go all the way through on one side. I don't know. Yeah, I think we can do it. I may be cutting my bench. I think that's a big no-no, isn't it? So there we go. Now we've got a little tiny piece of waste there. So there we've dealt with that little thin piece of wood, and that's a pretty safe way right there to cut that. Now we need to try it in our frame. So we're just going to scoot it right on in. You notice too that this thing is not, this panel is not very flat. It's kind of curled up. It's so thin it doesn't have enough oomph to move anything. So the frame of the door will pull it flat here when we install it. So. Well, there we go. Okay, I can see right there that my panel, when I pushed back up down here, I pushed it out, it opened up a little bit of gap. So I need to take my plane and knock just a little bit off the end. We can check it side to side, and I've got a little bit of movement there, if you can see that. So that's good side to side. So I need to take my plane and just clean the end up there just a little bit. Okay, so now we have two doors. And they're both dry fitted, they're square, and seem to be pretty flat, so you can kind of see where we're headed there. So there we go. There's the hardest part of the clock is almost done. We're going to glue this thing up, and then we'll move on to the case after that. So I'm going to get my stuff out and we'll glue up next.
If you're interested in learning traditional woodworking, come take a class at our school in Earlysville, Virginia. You can also visit our website at WoodAndShop.com, where you'll find a bunch of free woodworking lessons, workshop tours, and our very popular tool buying guides. And make sure you subscribe to our free newsletter to get our latest articles and videos. Enjoy!